Okay, so we can start again. I was thinking about the nature of some of the questions that were asked last week, which are actually a little different because we have a lot of visitors. So I thought a little more about sort of putting them all together, although some of the people who asked them last week aren't here this week. So I don't know if they'll want to hear the answer. Maybe we can tell them later. But I was thinking there was quite a lot of questions about sort of how to approach some of these points in the Lam.Rim. For example, when it says to apply the antidotes to anger, like to what extent do you do that? To what extent, if you notice afflictions in your mind, do you accept them as this is okay, this is how it is, and try to be present with it? And to what extent do you try to actually actively overcome it? And I was saying that there are extremes either way, and it's actually not just an obvious answer. And so I think sort of the question a lot of people were asking was, can we just take what's in this text as literal and sort of almost as dogma, that we just accept these are the points of how to meditate, or do we have to have some kind of critical analysis of it? Certainly, I think the author of the text, Tsongkhapa, he would have encouraged that, given his own approach of critical analysis, even of his own teachers. Of course, being a practitioner, he was very careful never to actively criticize his teachers or view them in any kind of negative light. But in the latter part of his life, he diverged significantly in point of view from his major teacher, Rendawa. And it said that his main teacher at that point was in Manjushri, that he was receiving teachings directly from Manjushris on a regular basis. Early on, this had happened through a medium. Right? He had been actually accessing Manjushri through a medium, what we would call today a medium, and then later was receiving teachings directly, which is in itself is rather unusual for a lot of our modern sensibilities. But anyway, the point is that so I said to one student here who was saying that a lot of his teachers tell him that how important it is to uphold the tradition and not to let that the tradition kind of slip away, and so he was feeling a lot of pressure. So I was saying, well, do you think Tsongkhapa would want us as students to uphold his tradition by just mindlessly repeating what he said? Or would he want us to uphold his tradition of using critical analysis? That seems to be more the point than just simply coming to the exact same conclusions. Because if there's different questions now, then there have to be different answers. We can't just because an answer was the right answer to one question at a particular time, doesn't mean it's the right answer to every question at all times. So it's more that we have to look at the way in which he approached the questions and see how might he have approached the same questions today. I was also, well, actually on that note, so before I get to the other point, there was one former monk of this house who actually sponsored the house, named Ilya. And in 2014, he gave some lectures in Australia, because he's now the translator at the center there in Adelaide, about these topics, about how can Westerners approach the points of the Lam.Rim. And his feeling, which I have I think in a lot of ways I agree with him. I don't say I agree with everything in that point, but I think he had a very there's a lot to what he said that is worth thinking about. His main point was that for Westerners to just approach the Lam.Rim from page 1, their minds aren't at that point, in terms of that our culture is so different, that there's a lot of hurdles to overcome. And especially he was talking about our worldview, our materialist worldview, which kind of takes for granted, even if we don't necessarily believe it, but because we're so conditioned to think this way about the mind and the brain being equivalent, and that all existence being essentially reducible to physical phenomena. And so his lectures were a series of arguments trying to disprove materialism, mainly through evidence, a number of different avenues. It's very interesting if you ever have a chance. The TBI symposium he gave, TBI 2 Symposium 2014. But I think, although I think it's not so clear cut that because he was suggesting maybe take 2 years and study these other things, like read about Ian Stevenson's research on reincarnation, and read about some books on non-materialist theories of mind, which I definitely think I would encourage people to do. But the idea that you would simply just take 2 years of doing that before you even approach the Lam.Rim, I think I think it's possible to have both. You need to have an understanding of both. But certainly as you go along, it's been my experience as you go along studying these things, to study a lot of other ways of seeing this, and not to see that as conflicting with your practice. That is part of your practice. The point of the practice, as Tsongkhapa argues again and again here, is to understand things properly. So it's not that when I'm reciting mantras or making prostrations that I'm doing practice, and when I'm thinking about things and questioning the teachings, then I'm not practicing. His Holiness also has made that point several times. He says that sometimes Westerners can get into this. He said that there's a His Holiness even he said there's a wrong view that's prevalent among many Tibetans that he hopes Westerners won't adopt, which is that Buddhist practice is just about devotion and about these mantras and prostrations. He said what you should think is that your main practice is ethical discipline, concentration, and insight, the 3 higher trainings, and then the mantras and the prostrations on the side as a supplement, a way to help that. But the main practice is thinking critically about the teachings within the context of practicing ethical discipline and practicing concentration, meaning mainly abandoning harming others, and practicing keeping the mind in a state that you maintenance your mind. You don't allow your mind to just go to all kinds of objects. You take care of your mind in the same way you take care of your health. So that's a little different than sometimes critical analysis is thought of just as an intellectual exercise, but this is, we say, yoga. Yoga doesn't just mean physical exercise, it means the training of the mind. And so the other point I was going to make is, we were talking about the difference between Western psychology and then traditional Tibetan psychology, in terms of not the discipline of psychology, but the psychology of people, their personal makeup, the way they think. And I was mentioning how different it is and how we've observed that being here. And I think also that's something to really think a lot about, because it's not something that I think anyone has come up with a very clear-cut answer. I would say, you can read this book and it'll explain to you the difference between the two of them. But until there's really an understanding of that, it's going to be very hard to translate the essence of these teachings. And so one thing that came to my mind this week was a book I read a few years ago. I think it's over on the shelf there. Some of you, if you know about psychology, you may have heard of this book, The Discovery of the Unconscious. It was written about 50 years ago. It's a big black book over on that shelf, I think. That's a history of the development of Western psychology. And he starts the book in the late half of the 18th century. And he suggests a number of differences between even now our modern psychology and then the psychology of people then, in the latter half of the 18th century, suggesting that it's hard for us to approach the way that they were thinking without understanding the context of it. And two significant differences he points out is, one is the lack of socialization, which I remember when I first came to Sera, was the first thing that my mentor in the house, Jampa Kelton, he mentioned to me, is that we take for granted in our culture how socialized we are. You go to school for 17 years, and you become a very different kind of person. The way you structure your thinking, the way you structure your day-to-day activities. Whereas most of my classmates in the monastery, when they showed up the first night of Chura, the first night of debate, having just escaped from their country, and before that they'd either lived on a farm or lived as nomads most of their life. And I showed up coming from having just graduated college, so it's a very different idea of how you think about who I am, and also how you relate to other people when you are socialized in that way. And the other thing he points out in this book is the way that we relate to physical pain. So again, we sometimes take this for granted. In the late 18th century, there was no anesthetic. There was rudimentary health care. A lot of it was probably more harmful than helpful. So people were just used to being in a lot of pain, and were used to the idea that if you get sick, you'll be in excruciating pain much of the time. Whereas for us today, to have that experience would be traumatic, because it's something that is just not thought of as a normal part of life. If you are very sick, even if you're dying, you can get some kind of anesthetic that will at least numb the pain a bit. And it's not something we just see. You don't go out on the street very much and see people starving on the side of the road. Occasionally we do still see it, but it's a lot less than it was. One thing, this wasn't in this book, but I've also read this, that you don't see in history books is how in that period of time there were dead children all over the place. It was just a normal part of life that people would, most children would die, and a lot of poor people had to just abandon their children because they couldn't take care of them. So they were often just found around bodies. So you think about how different that is. And he's suggesting that in terms of modern psychology, in terms of the way that modern psychology developed as a reaction to the change of people's thought, of the way people thought, that as pain became less of a normal part of life, then people found ways of psychologically distancing themselves from pain. And then that in itself became a way that then the psychologists in the late 19th century, like Freud and his students, that's why they had these theories about how people repress pain and how they shut it out of their conscious awareness, because that became something that was a normal part of life. Whether or not their theories were exactly correct, nowadays a lot of them are put into question, but the fact that they were observing this kind of behavior. So I think, compared to, again, with the traditional Tibetan culture, which until 1959 was pretty much the same, or even probably less developed than Europe in the late 18th century. And we see this to some extent here. If those of you in the house, if you have ever a chance to speak with Juni about his childhood experiences, right? Juni is the elderly Tibetan monk who lives with us. Life was pretty basic, and I think Jampa Kelden told me it was something about somebody in Juni's family had died, and then they didn't find out for a few years that the person had died. And then there's the way that it was just a sort of a circumstantial thing. It's very different than in our culture when somebody dies, and it's a big thing. We have a big funeral. It's not that they didn't care when somebody died, but it was just a normal part of life that you didn't always have access. You couldn't just call them and see how they were doing. And obviously now with my classmates, as I mentioned, that if they're still here, then almost certainly since that first night of Chura 17 years ago, they haven't been back to their home country, and a lot of them can't even have reasonably good conversations, honest conversations with their family, because they know that the phones might be tapped. So compared to that, our lifestyle is very different, and it's not a judgment one way or the other. This isn't about a talk about comparing rich and poor and inequality or something like that. I mean, that's a different question, but it's more just about how is one's psychology different, being in such a different background, and it's important to address that. It's important to see the way that our thoughts are different, because in traditional Buddhist psychology, the understanding is that that you have to understand the affliction in order to know the right antidote to it. So we have to understand the way that our makeup, what kind of afflictions we have, and then we can see the proper antidote. Maybe at a very deep level, when we talk about grasping at true existence, then there's basically overlap. But at a more coarse level, in terms of the way that our afflictions function, and even in terms of the way that we say there's philosophically acquired afflictions. So, say grasping at true existence, the philosophically acquired afflictions are when we have a philosophy based on that. We have an entire philosophy of materialism, which, this is a point of debate, but personally I would say that's a philosophically acquired affliction. It's a wrong view that leads to wrong behavior, and that has to be addressed in its own right, from its own side, not just with an argument against something else. So we have to be able to understand exactly where these, how these thought patterns are structured in order to address them. So that's a very long way of answering several of the questions from last week. But I thought it seemed like that was something a lot of people were interested in, were these questions of how much of this can be directly applicable to our situation now. So maybe it's a short way of saying there's no short answer. It's something we have to think about for a long time in a lot of ways. So finally, when His Holiness met with the founders of this house in 2002, before they built the house, that's one of the points he made, that this house should be a place that allows people the space to study from many different points of view, because this is not an easy thing to do, to think about it for a very long time, from many different angles. We like to have instant results, instant understanding, and I can see right away that there's some benefit to what I'm doing. But it's not like that. It takes a long time, and it's not easy. So those are two things that are very challenging. That's why it's so hard, I think, for people to stay here. The physical conditions are fairly minor compared to the difficulty of just taking the patience to think about this for a very long time and not seeing the result right away. So, with that, where we left off, I remember, because we had the last point last week about all the different faults of food, right? And I said there were so many faults of food that are overeating that we'll have to leave it for next week, because we weren't going to be able to get through it. So here we are with that. So Nimik Ni Sumlai, right? The three kinds of faults that come about as a result of overeating. So first we have Longchepe Gyule Junwei Nimik, right? So the drawback that comes from having partaken of food. So Kadok Driro Zambo Se Chida Shikyang So Ide Ching. So there's, however nice the color, the smell, the taste of the food is, if you chew it with your teeth, Chime Lempana, and then you moisten it with your saliva, Gupatar Nawa Sembaho. You think, no matter how nice it is, when you see it outside, the aroma is so fresh, It's so colorful. It's a colorful food, and you put it on your tongue, and it has such a powerful taste. When you chew it and it mixes with the saliva, and he says here, it's just like vomit. Just think about it as no different from that. It becomes the same. So of course we just say the word vomit, and it sounds repulsive, but that's all it is digested food. So then, say juale jungwenimik. So then the drawbacks of digesting the food. Say de nam kitun barham tamalajune. So if while you're eating, you're digesting some food, or at the end of your meal, you digest the food. Saja, so keishing, so then you get flesh and blood from that. Kachikni, shangche gyurne, so then some parts of it become feces and urine. Lugi mela neijing, and they stay in the lower part of your body. They are ninreishin silgupatang, and every day you have to clear them out. Se de latene, negirik duma kepersembo. Right, so then also as a result of that, you get all kinds of sicknesses, digestive pains, things like that. So then, se tsuale gyurwe, nimikni, right? So then the faults that arise from searching for food. So we have the faults of enjoyment, the faults of digestion, and now the faults of searching for food or trying to acquire food. So this has 5 faults. So dribble juming yemik, so then those that come from obtaining food. Se tong segi gu dondu, sa trangi nien shindu, pepa duma chain. So for the purpose of food, or for the causes of food, meaning the ingredients, then you have the dangers of heat and cold that afflict you while you're making effort to obtain them. So then if you don't get food, so then you get the pain of being hungry, other kinds of physical ailments that come from not eating. And then there's also this, if you have the food, there's the suspicion that somebody might steal it, or it might go to waste, might go bad. So then you have this very strong suffering that comes from putting a lot of effort into trying to protect the food. So maybe it's not just food, it's also, as he says, the cause of food, maybe he also means money. This is very applicable to money. When you have a lot of money, you want to protect it. You suspect that you might lose it. So then, zawa nyampani, so then you lose your friends. So de chiru pa tang pula supayam penzun searching. So for the purpose of food, then parents and children, they fight together. Tapoho, so there's also quarrel over food. And then ngomi shipani, so then not being satisfied. Dela sepa jeche gyurne, so then your craving just becomes more. Gelbosok pensundu yulchurching, and kings even go into battle. And dungel duma nyawaho, so then you have all kinds of suffering. I'm trying to think of any. I'm not an expert on military history, but I don't know if there was a war that was started over food. I did hear that King Louis, one of the kings of France, which one, I'm not sure which King Louis, I heard that he asked for what we would today call a doggy bag, right? And then the chef committed suicide. So this maybe is the kind of thing. If you're very invested in the food and you think, I have to make the exact right amount of food for the king, and he does not the right amount, it seems like a very trivial thing. But when your mind is very invested in that is important, then it takes on much more importance than it might have otherwise. So then Rama mepenyeba, so then the fault of not having independence, right? So Shengi se sawanam je dondu parutang tapana. So for the purpose of others' food, right? You want to obtain food from others, then you fight with the opposing side for the purpose of the Lord. So I think maybe they send you into battle, things like that. I mean, So I would say food. Of course, it's not just because the king wants a nice meal. Countries do go to war for food, for agricultural reasons. That one nation has more access to resources than the other one. So that's certainly we've seen in the past and even today. It actually, if you look deeply, it's at the root of a lot of conflicts. They say that the war in Syria was really, although it was publicized in a lot of different ways, it came down to lack of water resources. That was how it was, at least the conclusion of some scientific research that I had read about. So then, so then you suffer many kinds of suffering as a result. So so then the sufferings that come from from engaging in wrong actions, right? So for the purpose of food, you do negative actions. So seidan seiki gyuichir. So again, for food, and then the causes of food. So I said it before ingredients, but maybe we also include things like money and means of production, things like that. So gosungi dikpasakne. So then you accumulate negativity of the three doors of body, speech, and mind. Chiwetse. So then when you die, derak training gyus into chijing. So then you remember those negative actions, and then you die with regret. And then shinekyang right? So then you die and you fall into a miserable rebirth. So de tanayang penyung gayo de selatene lune boho, right? So he's saying, there, although there are all these faults of food, right? He's saying there is some benefit from it, because on the basis of food, then you can sustain your body, right? Like he says that Shantideva says at the end of chapter 8, the fifth perfection, chapter 8, of the perfection of concentration. He goes on and on about all the faults of samsara, and then the faults of cherishing self, and so forth, and the faults of the body. But then finally he says, but for the purpose of accomplishing my aims, I should sustain this body, like to accomplish my goals. So I should use it as see it as something to use for work, rather than something to use for enjoyment. But for that purpose, I should sustain it. So tetsamki chir du say tempermutic bay. So just for that purpose, so I think the point is that purpose is like, I see. Tetsamki chir du say, I think he's saying, it's not saying you shouldn't eat, right? Because the wording here is, just for that mere purpose, it's not appropriate to rely on food. I think he's saying that you shouldn't just enjoy food in terms of eating more than you need to sustain yourself, right? So if your main purpose is to sustain yourself, then there's no need to go out of your way to have all the finest foods. So nilu nepalatene. Oh, I see. He's saying, it's if it was just to sustain your body, right? You were just eating to sustain your body for no other purpose, then that wouldn't be appropriate. But he's saying right? So for that purpose, I will then practice brahmacharya, is samparchupa, right? So it really means pure conduct, so specifically samparchupa talks about celibacy, but more the point here is I will practice religious conduct. I will practice dharma conduct. So I'll use my body for that purpose. Sometimes when you're thinking about these points, then you notice things. So when I was about a couple years before I ordained, when I was working on the summer in college, we were just in the grounds crew of our university. So one of the other students that was working with us, he had a T-shirt. It was some kind of eating club or something, and there was their slogan on the back. It said, "Eat to live, live to eat." And so I was thinking about that at the time. If that's really all your purpose of life, then what is the purpose? What are you doing? You eat for the purpose of sustaining yourself, and you sustain yourself so you can keep enjoying food. But if you really believe that that's all there is to life, then that is a goal that we might pursue. But the idea here is that there might be something more useful to do with our human body, and so just to have that motivation, even if we don't have it as our slogan, but maybe sometimes it can be motivating, if at an unconscious level. So you have to think if that actually accomplishes anything in the end. So Jimpapo tang jindak papatang shadrak sirde tibu kipper chen de ne jimper chippa deragi chawa tibu tibu chimpu giro chawa. Yeah. Yeah, it must be some kind of expression here, because he's saying the person who's donating, right, and then the donor, Jindak, they should squeeze their skin and flesh and blood, and then wishing for a superior result, then they can engage in that. So then you achieve that great result. So you think that way, and then you enjoy your food. So yeah, it's not. I have to see in here. Benefactors and those who actually carry out acts of charity work so hard that their skin, flesh, and blood dry up. Then they make their gifts with a wish for a special result. So I will ensure that the actions have great effects. Yeah, so I think the point is that you put great effort into your actions. So some people who work for charitable purposes, they work so hard that their skin, flesh, and blood dry up. Right? Sir. Yeah, sir here it's talking more about like, and dry up I don't think that's quite, I mean, they use that probably as the English colloquial, but sir, it's kind of like squeezing, right? But the point is that people exert themselves very strongly for various purposes, for virtuous purposes in this case, for working for charity. So in the same way, we think put that kind of effort into one's Dharma practice. So then Laptuzu, Chimpapo la Pendapatang, Lugi Simbo Tanda, Sangsingi Duala Maompana, Chugi Du Nyapatang. So it says in the Labdu, right, which is the compendium of training by Shantideva. So it's saying when you're practicing generosity to different beings, like Lugi Sinbo is talking about the microscope. I mean, he probably didn't have this term then, but Sinbo is this like small, it's like bug, we might say in English. Right, so the bugs in your body, but we would say today the microscopic organisms in your body. So you think that you're benefiting them by offering this food to them, and then to benefit your sponsors or your benefactors who have offered you the food, you dedicate for them. But the idea is that you do that as a small act of generosity now, so that in the future you can gather them into your retinue and give them Dharma teaching. So you make that aspiration by having this small connection now from offering them this food. So so then you think about, for the purpose of achieving the benefit of all sentient beings, so then you should eat like that. That's what it says in the compendium of training. So he says, remember that when you're eating, or be mindful of that recollection. So then Shedring Laikyang, so Shedring, right, the letter to a friend by Nagarjuna. Kase men tang jawo rikpai. This we recite oftentimes before eating, right? It's on the FPMT there, the common list of prayers for eating, right? So thinking of the food as medicine and understanding that, then not for attachment or hatred. I will not partake of the food for that. And gakchir, so not to become fat. And mala niebe chirmala, and also not to become prideful or puffed up. And sakchir, right? So not to have a beautiful body. Mala lune bashik chir, so merely for the purpose of sustaining the body. She sungso. So that's about food. And the point, originally, the point here was how to approach eating food as a Dharma practitioner. And essentially, the purpose, the conclusion is to think of it as a means to sustaining the body. So you do what you need to do to sustain your body, and I think it's good to understand a lot about what is and is not healthy food. But within that, then with that knowledge, then you can put that into practice. You have the motivation to do so. And it's not just about torturing yourself, but feeling that this is to keep your body healthy for a much greater purpose. So then we have minyawa, right? So not sleeping. So minyawa naljulu tsun ching and yawait sejidar chao, right? So putting effort into the yoga of not sleeping, but then if you do sleep, then what to do during that time, right? So most of us aren't at the point of not sleeping, but we were very fortunate that Kabje Lama Rim.Chen.Mo showed that aspect, that to demonstrate that such a thing is possible. It would seem that for many years Rinpoche didn't sleep. I was thinking last week we were talking about it. It says here that you should sleep in the middle part of the night, right? So I'd identified that as 11 to 3, and then if you needed to do more, you can extend that, but then use that time for sleep. And I think, as some of you know, Venerable Roger had often encouraged Rinpoche to take better care of his health, saying that Rinpoche were concerned that we want you to live a long time, and he would encourage him to see the various doctors. And there was a story, I don't remember all the details, but it was something that Roger had brought in some doctor who had said to Rinpoche how important it is to sleep in the middle part of the night. And so that evening, Rinpoche looked at his watch at 11:55. It's time to go to sleep. So he lay down. And then at 12:05, he got up. So he slept in the middle part of the night. So it said if you have that level of mind, it's not necessary. It's not just a matter of forcing yourself not to sleep, but if you have very, very deep concentration, then that can serve to replenish the body. I mean, it's still a mystery in a lot of ways to scientists about what sleep actually does and why we need sleep. So to say it can serve the purpose of sleep. Well, what is that purpose? We don't really know. But it's clear, at least from our own experience, that if you don't sleep, then you're tired and you lose track of your thoughts. It's very hard to stay focused, and it's very hard to. Another thing that's when you're tired, it's clear you have less inhibition. So as a Dharma practitioner, it's actually quite important to keep your body rested so that you can control yourself and not engage in become overpowered by afflictions. But at a certain point, maybe that is not such an issue if your mind is able to sustain itself more so. And here at Sera, we're kind of forced into that. You learn how to function with less sleep. Otherwise, it's very hard to maintain the pace here. But in any case, it's saying if you do sleep, then how to use the time or how to sleep properly. So Shedringle, again from Nagarjuna, Rebe Dagni Nimper Tarak Tang. So Rikbe Dagni, in this case, is the king, right? Because the letter to a friend, the friend is his king. If his friend is the king. He's saying it's his student who's the king, who had asked him to write some advice for him. So Rikbe Dakni means like the great ruler, or the great one of the great lineage. So he's addressing the king. He says, during the entire daytime, meaning don't lie down during the day. And Semohong, so then even in the nighttime, Dungi Dume Deideni, so not in the earlier latter parts of the night. Neltseong, so even when you do sleep, Debu Meb Migur War, so don't make it meaningless, not having any kind of result, like it should have some kind of benefit. Drendang Demba Derak Bardunu, and no is imperative for sleep, right? So endowed with mindfulness, then lie down and sleep. So recollect some kind of virtuous motivation when you're going to sleep, and use the sleep as a way of enhancing your practice, rather than just going to bed without analyzing your mind and trying to set your mind in a more dharmic motivation. So she sungpe nimo potang semo cha domini. So then the entire day and the earlier and later parts of the night, tunging o tang tun sam tsu jitar chawa dempe. So he's saying, Tsongkhapa is saying this text explains what to do during the time of sleep and at the end of sleep, before and after. Chakpa tang duk ne dipangale. So then he's saying, you can pace back and forth or sit up, and semyonso jompe. So purify your mind of the 5 hindrances, I think they call them. I mean, they're really 5 obscurations, because they obscure obtaining concentration. Right. So the 5 obscurations are ni tang mukpa, dumpa, nusem, gu gyu, right, and tetsum. Right. So that's the first one is dupa the dumpa, meaning attachment to object of the desire realm, but mainly it's talking about to sense pleasures. So attachment or desire for sense pleasures. And then nusem is harmful intent. So then that's a major obstacle to concentration if you have any kind of harmful intent. That's why the practices of the immeasurables, right, of immeasurable love, immeasurable compassion, those are meant as ways of enhancing concentration, because it's not, ideally it is for the benefit of others, but at the beginning level it's mainly for your own benefit. If you think about love, then it will decrease your harmful intent, and it'll help you to increase your concentration. So then ni tang mukpa is sleepiness and lethargy. Right, so those are 2 different mental factors. We talked about this a bit last week. It's different than Jingwa I talked about last week. Is laxity. That's different, though related. But ni is just sleep. But when we say ni is a mental factor, right? So it's not sleep in the sense of being asleep. It's the mental factor that draws the mind inward and away from external objects. So that brings the mind into sleep. And when one is asleep, then that mental factor is functioning, so that the way you dream, your mind doesn't go externally to outside objects. But excessive, right, because that's considered a changeable mental factor. It can be virtuous if it's done because you actually need to rest your body. But if it's just drawing your mind away because you're just dozing off, then it obstructs doing virtuous practice, or especially concentration. And then mukpa, lethargy, is just kind of a general heaviness. That's an afflictive mental state. It keeps the mind from engaging in objects. It's sort of, that you don't, although you're not necessarily tired, though you might feel tired, but it's just out of a habit of being always a little bit, we say lethargical in English, that you're not lethargic. You're not, you just don't have a lot of energy to do things. But if you practice being more active, then you'll become more active. It's not that you need more sleep. So then you have so the first one was desire, then harmful intent, and then those are together, sleep and lethargy, and then gu tang gupa, right? So it's kind of the opposite extreme. So first, gyupa is regret. So that's another one of the changeable mental factors. So it's changeable because if you regret negative actions you've done, that is a positive mind. That's a virtuous mind. If you regret positive actions you've done, then that's a negative mind. But in any case, when you're trying to concentrate, having excessive regret will hinder your concentration because you're always feeling guilty about something you did before. So it's not that you want to not have regret for negative past actions, but it's a matter of learning how to control that mind such that it doesn't overwhelm you. And it's essentially the main antidote is not to engage in negative actions. If you engage in a lot of negative actions, then you'll naturally have regret, unless you really don't have any kind of regret for your actions, which is probably worse. But the best thing is to engage in actions that don't lead to regret in the future, and then it'll be easier to have concentration. And then gupa is excitement, right? So that's actually a factor of a desire, but it's a different kind of desire, where it's more subtle. It's just that the mind is going towards external objects. You're trying to concentrate and thinking this is nice, that's nice, or even just not necessarily thinking it's nice, but just having interest in other things that distracts the mind. That is essentially a function of desire. And then finally, tetsun, which is doubt. So I think we talked about this several times before, but this is an issue about what exactly is meant by doubt. Right, so we have the doubt that's one of the 5 hindrances. If Jigja was here, he would remind me. Because in Sanskrit, the word that's translated into Tibetan is tetsun, is doubt, and then is in English is doubt. There's actually 4 different words that are sometimes translated into tetsun. And so the one that's within the 5 hindrances, I think, is vikiccha, except for the v, vikichita. So that's a different kind of doubt than sometimes like when it says, right, like Aryadeva says, just to have doubt about emptiness shakes the foundation of cyclic existence. Where there it's used in a positive way. You have maybe things really are empty of inherent existence, and it's like suspicion, you might say. There's a different word in Sanskrit. It means something different. So it can be quite an issue if it's saying, well, doubt is a negative thing, and then it's saying, like, it doesn't say this in Lam.Rim., but it's in Serching, another text by Tsongkhapa. He says that the sharp faculty practitioners, meaning the ones that are approaching the teachings in the right with the right attitude, are the ones that approach with doubt. If you don't have doubt, then you won't really come to understand it. It'll just be mere faith without any kind of real examination of the meaning. So doubt here is talking about this within the 5 hindrances. It's what we call afflictive doubt. So it's just a kind of a constant questioning that isn't based on real wish to understand things. It's sort of like a cynicism. So it's just like, well, not really giving something a fair chance. So then, of course, if you have that, you're always going to be plagued by these questions about, maybe I shouldn't be concentrating, maybe I should be doing this instead, and you can't keep your mind and focused on one goal at a time. So that is a major hindrance to gaining concentration. So I won't go into it much here, but that's certainly something that's worth examining. What is it meant by doubt? What are the different kinds of doubt? So you should purify your mind of those, and don't then do chawa de. So then, with a meaningful activity, ngarshe pataro. Right. So as it was described before, he described before about the practice of lying down. Right, because we're talking about sleep here, with the right kind of mindset. So di ta wampo gone dompa tang she jindu chupa sumla. So this here about, right. So we've gone through these different. We're going through. I mean, if you recall, I should have mentioned at the beginning. We always go through the outlines, so we have an idea of where we are. This is in the context of within how to sustain a meditation session. It's what to do between sessions, right? So then we have during the time between the sessions, you should should train in these 4 ways. One is to restrain your senses, your sense doors. We talked about that last week, and then to have introspection. We talked about that last week too. And then the third one was to eat the right amount. So then this fourth one is about not sleeping or sleeping in the right way. So these 4 he's saying here. So this fourth one about sleeping, and then the first one about guarding your senses, and then the second one about introspection. So those 3. So they have ways of, you have to use them both when you're doing your practice in the actual meditation session and between sessions. Right? So the eating is only between sessions, but the sleeping, it's really lack of sleep. You want to avoid falling asleep during your meditation session. So he's saying you need to apply these same guidelines at that point. But in this context here, he's talking about between sessions. Right? So although they do apply to your meditation session, this discussion here is about what to do between sessions, because here he's going to talk about how to lie down in the correct posture. Right? So that's not for when you're doing your meditation session. At that point, you want to be sitting up. So nyelit kuncho, right? So the actual practice of sleep. Tun sam yinpe, so it's a between session practice. So therefore, de ang dun medu me tongwar chao. Right? So don't make it meaningless. And in general, that's the idea. Between your meditation sessions, you're not meditating, but you still want to make your time meaningful. So dejitar chawani. So how to do that? Nimotang tsemola cha sumta chipe cha dula. Right? So if you divide the day and the night both into three sections, so you have the first section of the night, gewe chawe du dawar chene. So then in the first part of the night, so I mentioned before about my teacher some years ago who's passed away now, who had said that the first part of the night he would practice. For him, I think he said it was 8 to 12. So 8 to 12 p.m. he would be doing his meditation, and then sleep from 12 to 4, and then do his morning meditation from 4 to 8. So this is in the first part before you go to sleep. You engage in some kind of virtuous practice to prepare your mind for sleep. And then dune char bawala bapetse. So then when it's time to do so, when you get to the barwala char barwa is the middle part of the night. When it's time to go to sleep, then yawar chare, then go to sleep. Nigi geper chawe jungwanam. Nigi geper chawe chiro. Yeah, I think it's So Jigeper Chawe Jungwanam, it's a bit of a confusing phrase, but it's with those elements that are increased by sleep, then the sleep increases them. So I think it's that you use the sleep to replenish the elements of your body, is my guess what he's talking about. But let me check also on that. Yeah, that's exactly what he's saying. For by sleeping you will enhance those elements of the body which are benefited by sleep. So, sort of a tautology, isn't it? Sleep benefits the things that are benefited by sleep. So te tar lu te tena. So if you te is like to nurture or to cause something to enhance, right? So if you enhance your body or like replenish your body in that way, I think is the best word. If you replenish your body in that way, gewe chocolate sunju ni chawala shindu lesu rongshing. So if you do that, then your body and your mind, or especially your body, is saying, will become very serviceable to use as you like for virtuous practices when you're awake. Pemprayang gyuro, and it will also benefit your body. So when you go to sleep, nekang ne chir chungde, so Uh, yeah. Yeah, so yeah, you see, go out of if you're sleeping room, right? He's going to go saying go clean first. So before you, because you've been sitting in your bedroom meditating is the idea. So now leave your bedroom and go and clean your feet. And not when you come back, nandu shupatang, lo ye papapte, then sit in your bed and then lie down on the right side. And kampa yumpa yipe tengdu, and place your left leg on top of your right leg. De shagne sengitar nyawachao, and lie down like a lion. This is called the lion's posture. It's often in Buddhism, it's considered the best way to sleep. If you recall, that's how the Buddha was said to have lay down when he passed away. I don't know if lions actually sleep that way, though. I would think they sleep like you see cats, they kind of with the paws folded like that, but I'm not sure. So, Sengitar Nyawani. So, saying, what does it mean to sleep like a lion? So, Jitar Dundur Tamchigi Nana. Sengini. So this is really the point. It's not so much about what posture the lion is in, but the point is you sleep with the courage, with the proudness of a lion, because it's saying among all the animals, then the lion has the strongest body. Right? I mean, it's like athletic body, but the point is he has the most the body that is superior in terms of he can overtake the others. So sem sing toatang therefore the lion's mind is very uplifted, because there's a sense of nobody can challenge me. So tempe, and very stable mind. There's no fear. So paro nupa shindu. So then it can easily overcome others. So miniawar najala sumbahang. So either practice the yoga of not sleeping, or sel chewa sugi paro nunjing nepe sengishin dunyogi. Or if you do sleep, then as the way that you would with your superior dexterity of body, or your superior force, that you would crush opposing sides, in the same way stay asleep like a lion. So not like yidak, like a ghost, or la, it's a god, or dupa lechupa, the ones who enjoy desire. So these are. It said that yida, the hungry ghosts, they sleep facing down on their stomach, and then the gods sleep on their back, and then the ones who enjoy desire, they sleep on the left side. So not like that. Takinyao tang ni detarmayente. So they're not like that. Derak tamche lelu chen. So yeah, in sequence, I think actually all of them. It's not in any particular order. So lelo chen, they're lazy. Sundu shempa, they have weak effort. And paro no but chungweche, they're not really able to overcome the opposite side, or really their own minds is the main idea. So namtrang chikdu na. So from one perspective, lo yepe sengi shindu nyawani. So by lying on your right side like a lion, chuniki lu tang ni lokmayang. So naturally your body will not just slacken, and even when you do fall asleep, tempa mi jepatang, you won't lose your mindfulness. Ni tukpo mi gyurvata, and you won't fall very deeply asleep. Milam dibaham nyampa mi waingi. So also you will not have negative dreams, or you say sinful is the word here, but what's the way we could say it? Like you have negative thoughts during your dreams. A dream about things that are negative actions. So if you don't do that, if you sleep a different way, so then all the faults that are the opposite of those four. Right? So what do we have? Four, that your body will slacken, and then you will lose your mindfulness, and you'll fall into very deep sleep, and you'll have bad dreams. So sampat tindrawe nyawalajile. So then with what kind of thought should you go to sleep? Now adujini. So then the discriminating factor, thinking of the perception of light. Right. So Ugi Tsenma Lepra Sungde. So apprehend a form of light, like imagine a ball of light or something like that. So then imagine you sleep with your mind embraced in this light. So then when you sleep, your mind won't just fall into murk and darkness. So really confusion, we could say. And then Dempani, so then with mindfulness. Chu gewa dun tan dempa niempatang sapatang gombale jungwe trapa nidu mohon nidum diduma songi bardu is your damwat dembahu. Yeah, so thinking about virtuous Dharma practices, and then what listening to Dharma, thinking about Dharma, meditating on Dharma. So do those until you have that mindfulness until you go to sleep. So then it will follow along. The point is, if you do that all day, then when you sleep, your mind will naturally be in that state. So like when I was at the Dharma Center, there was one new student who was about the same age as I was, in the early 20s, and he was he was very busy. So he asked one of the teachers at the center, well, can you teach me dream yoga? Because I don't have time to practice during the day. But the teacher's response was, well, if you don't practice during the day, there's no hope that you're going to be able to practice at night. If you practice all day, then naturally your dreams will reflect that. But if you think that you can just go about your business during the day and then just use your sleep time as your Dharma practice time, it will just, because you can't control your thoughts during that time, it will just naturally follow whatever kind of thoughts you are cultivating during the day. So then therefore, nilobit seyang, so that when you do fall asleep, let's say yang malopatang drawa, so it'll be like you're not falling asleep. Chudedak lasemde, so you'll be thinking about Dharma. Lem mandu jesu drupa gyurwate, and then your mind will naturally just keep going back to that again and again. Dona nilokit seyang gijur kyomho. So in short, when you're sleeping, you'll be sustaining Dharma virtuous practices. So shipani, so then fourth is seijini. Right, so what is this is the same thing. It's about how to sleep with introspection. Right, so detar trempa tempetse. So in that way, when you you're practicing mindfulness, so whatever affliction might arise, you'll know it. Tandu milenching. So don't take it up. Meaning don't acquiesce to it. Right. So if your mind is saying be angry, you don't acquiesce and then get angry. You just recognize that thought is there, and pawarcha. Then you can abandon it. Danwai dushini sumlai. So then we have the thought of arising, right? The perception that I'm going to arise soon. That has three parts. So damboni napatam cheniniki nupa la sem shoa miche par. So in all ways, when you're oppressed by sleep, So don't shila, right? Shoa is like apply yourself, right? It's a bit hard again to translate that exactly, but it's like don't kind of invest yourself in things that make you overpowered by sleep. Sundrigi simpe semgi, but with a mind that's supported by the virtuous effort, right? Ridak shindu tu trelginyawo. Yeah, okay, tum trelginyawo. So like a deer, you should think about arising soon, right? And ridak, we can translate it as deer, but ridak, it kind of just means any kind of animal that is more of a prey than a predator, right? So the point is that if you're on the bottom of the food chain, then you're very careful when you sleep, because you don't want to just fall into a deep sleep. You want to be ready as soon as the predator comes, that you can arise quickly. So Dani Nima Tukjing, that way you won't have very heavy sleep. And Dawe Dule Miular, so then you won't sleep, you won't pass by the time of rising, and you won't sleep late. Miuwa Sibra Nupahu, and you'll be able easily to get up. So the Nipani, second, Kima Dagi Sangi Ginawe Miniawa. Yeah. So yeah, I have a note here. Miniawa, right? It's Niel Tong. The old edition reads Niel Tong, which makes more sense, right? Tamshidi Drupa Chao, because yeah, it's saying so. Kema is like alas, but maybe here more just oh. So I will actualize the manner of sleeping that the Buddha has given permission for us to do. That's the point. Otherwise, if you have minyawa, it's I will actualize the not sleeping that the Buddha has allowed us to do, but that doesn't really make sense. So it's saying I will practice in this way. I will practice in the way that the Buddha has given permission for practitioners, which is to sleep as a way of sustaining the body. So thinking that way, Deidra so then in order to actualize the advice that was given, Bepa Chempo Dumba Keboho. So with great effort, then give rise to aspiration to do that. So Dani Sangiki Nawe Sengi Niel Tang Le Lakche Mepa Niewoho. So it's saying then sleep. It's even more clear because here it is using the Niel Tang that the Buddha has given permission for. So the lion's way of sleeping that the Buddha gave permission for. So you should sleep just that way, not doing more or less than that. So Sumpani, Jitar Dagi Teng Miniawatang, Devich Nam Sunpe Jupitar, Sayan Dera Chao Nim to Simple Hu. So it's saying just like today, I didn't sleep, meaning up until now when I'm going to sleep, I've been awake all day doing virtuous practices, and I've applaud myself to Dharma. In the same way, I'll do the same thing tomorrow. So I'm going to go to sleep now to continue that again tomorrow. So Didini Gewa the Dumba Gunmachipa Che Day. So if you do that, then you uninterruptedly begin engaging with aspiration for virtue. De Jing Inayang. So even if you fall into forgetfulness, so even if that happens, then still again apply effort to keep on increasing that. So this manner of eating and sleeping is not a wrong deed. That's interesting. We debated this quite a bit in Vinaya. Some of my classmates were of the opinion that if you're eating, it's necessarily non-virtuous. But I didn't think so. I mean, this would be a good quotation to use in debate. Because if you have the right motivation, it can be virtuous. But there's a lot of these discussions in Vinaya, right? So something might, if the one was of that opinion that eating is non-virtuous, you could say, well, but it's a necessary evil. You could say that you have to do it to sustain your body, but you want to minimize it. But I don't think, because one way to put it is that there is no permission in the Vinaya for anything that's non-virtuous. So if not eating was non-virtuous, then technically, according to the Vinaya, you wouldn't be allowed to eat. But there is permission to eat at certain times of the day in the right amounts. So that would imply that it does not have to be non-virtuous. So that's what he's saying here. Eating and sleeping are not, if you do it in this way, they're not unwholesome actions. So so if you do them for the purpose, for a meaningful purpose, so it appears that therefore you obstruct all kinds of ways that you might just meaninglessly pass your life away. So Papa Topmegi do Trangde. So Arya Asanga, he gives many sutra quotations here. Jitar Tema Papatar Shebayino. So I've explained it in the way that he himself explained it in his text. So we said that before. It's mostly from Mungompa Kundu, right? The Abhidhamma Samuccaya. So Detar na Ngishi Kabgi Kyongsu Tunma Maimpa Madok. So Madokbar. So yeah, so this is the particular way of practicing within the meditation session. Other than that, right, then Jowatang Mushitang, Jupatang Tunsamsu Dedar Chawa Namni. So that we put that aside because we talked about that earlier, but here it's terms of preparation and during the actual session and at the end of the session and between sessions, there's common practices that you want to engage in. So Dine Sungde, so from this onward, right, so he's just described, as we've said, I mentioned several times, that this is all coming from the section on how to relate to the spiritual teacher, because that's the first major section in the text about a topic for contemplation. So then he describes how to contemplate something, but it's not specific to that. This same format can be used for all the other topics in the text. That's what he's saying here. I've just described how to sustain a meditation session and also how to practice between sessions and so forth. So how to sustain the meditation session, that's going to be a little different because I'm meditating on the spiritual teacher, or I'm meditating on impermanence, or I'm meditating on compassion. But in terms of what to do between sessions, he says, Dine sumde laktangi bargi miknangang kyangwa tamche the jangwa chao. So you can apply it to anything from here up until the practices and special insight at the end of the book. You just apply it the same format to them on how to meditate. So tun samsu jidar chawa she sindo. So now I've finished my explanation of what to do between sessions. So now we have Kyongsula Lokto Kappa. Right, so this is just, we had how to sustain a meditation session. It had two sections. Right, so Kyongsu Mil, the actual way, and then Lokto Kappa. So just negating wrong views about this, right? Which is mainly, as we said before, it's this wrong view that meditation just means concentration and emptying your mind of thoughts. But he's arguing against that here, that it can mean thinking about things. So Sungra Gongdrel Tang Chepe Shung Chemo Nam Mengak Du Chawala. So in order that all of the scriptures and the commentaries on them, all these great texts, that they might dawn as in personal instruction. So lo kama chopa nang nare. So all those people who never really thought of that, they say, right? So we say kachik nare sometimes, right? So the kachik nare is a very common term in a Tibetan debate text. It means somebody says. Right? So I think Donyo in his translation is Strani says, right? That's his. So here Strani is so it's rather than just saying kachik nare, it says all those people who never really gave consideration to the way that all the teachings can appear as personal instructions. They say Lam gombe tse ni yula yang mi chupa. So when you're meditating on the path, you should not again and again analyze the object. Jokam konar chade, you should only do placement meditation, meaning concentration. Susa dobe sherabki, so with an analytical wisdom, yan ayandu chipani, if you analyze again and again with an analytical wisdom, tosamgi gabian bichu, that's what you should do when you're studying, when you're contemplating, not when you're meditating. Dopanani, because all conceptual thought, semer zimpa yimpe, it apprehends a sign, right? Meaning that it has the appearance of true existence. Sangawala gekche here, so it is an obstacle to achieving enlightenment. She sero, so they say. So dini nyamnaki ne tene madope chilcho chempo yinde. So this is just the meaningless talk, meaningless banter of somebody who does not at all understand the point of how to do practice. Because so it says in the Mahayana Sutra Lamkara, because this is what Tsongkhapa often does to prove his point. He's saying, well, okay, you don't accept this point of view. You think that you have the right understanding of the traditional Buddhist texts. I'll give you a quotation from a traditional Buddhist text that we both accept. This is always understood in these arguments, that You can't quote a text from something that somebody else doesn't accept. Right? It's not that say, well, it says so in the Bible, so you have to believe it. Well, I don't believe the Bible, so what does that affect me, right? But if I present myself as a Dharma practitioner, and then I should be able to defend myself if somebody says, well, the Buddha said this. Then you can say, well, okay, I don't agree. Well, okay, well, if you don't consider yourself a Buddhist, that's perfectly fine. But if you want to consider yourself upholder of this tradition, which these people are presenting themselves in that way, then you have to be able to explain this. What does this text mean if it doesn't contradict you? So do it again, right? The Mahayana Suchalamkara by Maitreya, he says, Dina dambo tula. Right, this is a verse. So Dina dambo tula tene sushin yila chepa jung. Right. So first, on the basis of hearing, meaning study, right? Hearing many teachings. On the basis of that, then you have correct mental engagement. Right. You start thinking about things in the sulshin. It's like according to the method, according to the way it's done, meaning that you do it according to the dharmic way of thinking. Sulshin yila chepa gomle yandak dundu yeshijong. So then, on the basis of thinking in this way and habituating to that, right? The word gom, meditating, but here it's habituating to that. Then you'll get wisdom that sees the correct meaning, right? The actual way things are. So then Tsongkhapa says, so by using the wisdom arisen from contemplation to analyze the meaning of the points that you have learned through your study, then you will get a wisdom arisen from meditation that directly apprehends the real meaning, which is emptiness in this context. So dena gan yam sunya langyude. So then the thing that you're going to practice, right? And langyude dambo shenai nyene. So first you should listen to it from others. Shento king ebarche, and you should get an ascertainment that comes from the power of others. Right? We talk about that a lot in debate. What does that mean? Shento king epa. So then dene topedun. So then on for the thing that you've heard, that you've learned about, Rangi lungtang rikpe sulshindu sampe. You should use scripture and reasoning to analyze it in the correct manner. Rang toking eperche. So then you should ascertain it with your own power. De tar tosanging eperchede. So that way, if you ascertain it through hearing and contemplation, tetsum tang drelnayang. So even if you're free of if you're free of doubt, then yanta yang du tribar chepat la gomba la gompa. So then familiarizing with it again and again, that is gom, right? That is meditation or habituation. She serways. That's what is said by Maitreya. Yang chugi gompa yatang. So then again and again meditating with analysis. Michipe chogom nika good day. So then you need also the placement meditation that doesn't analyze. You need both of them. So tosangi ten la bapate la michupar. But then if it's that you don't analyze at all the thing that you've studied and contemplated, jokpatang. So sutope chene. So then so you have first of all the placement that is not analyzing, and then you have sosudope chene, and then analyzing with analysis. It's two different words. Sosudopa and chepa, right? So maybe analyzing it with, how do we usually say it? Examining it with analysis. Gompanika nawai chir. So there appear to be these two ways of meditating. Then gom tamche jokam ditupani. So those people who say that all kinds of meditation are placement meditation, they're not. So for example, namdok chik sungne, nedok chik sungne. So if you hold one grain of barley, dru tamche di kona yeno. So you say all grains are just like this. She serotang, drawayempe. So it's like that. Somebody just takes one little grain of barley and says every grain of barley is exactly the same. really not just barley, but every grain, right? So the first is ne. Ne is barley, and then dru is just the general word for grain. So then deang tojengi sheraki ngodu tupatam. So, it's quite late. Yeah, so we're at the top of the page here. We should stop. We can have question and answer. People like. Yeah.
I remember in the description of the lion posture, I remember something like also putting your finger or something at the nostril.
Yeah, well, I think of the idea. Yeah, that's true. There's some descriptions where you do that, but I think the idea is generally because it's supposed to close the right channel, which is so if you're lying on the right side, then naturally it will close more because you're on the right side. But there are some techniques they talk about where you I don't personally do that, and then you can't breathe very well, right? You want to try to breathe through your nose anyway, not so much your mouth. So, but one thing they suggest is to do the 9-round breathing meditation, meaning you inhale, exhale through various nostrils before you sleep, so it evens out the channels. Yes.
Yeah, I had a thought with a verse that we just went about the food. The second line, Duchak Shetang Mepar Tenkite.
Yeah.
So, what would be Tenki at that point? Because it's like Shetang Mepar. So, how does that.
Make use of food without. It's Bao Sad Atata Drimbu, right? Satat, yeah. So, like, make use of or make recourse to. So, take food or rely on food without attachment and hatred.
So tenki would be like.
Well, then gi yeah, like what is it? Bao yeah. So gi is just like che. It means to do.
To do.
Yeah. So den gi it just means den.
Rely.
Yeah. Make use of. You make use of. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, basically means in your continuum. So in your continuum, not to have attachment or just.
Right. Yeah. Eat, I mean, like we recite it usually in English. It's like let us eat without attachment and hatred. Right. So don't eat out of attachment to food. Don't eat out of anger, and that you would think I want to eat more. Defeat my enemies by being stronger or something like that. Whatever it might be. Eat out of motivation to sustain the body. Yes.
What is the antidote to lethargy?
Lethargy?
Yeah.
There are different antidotes. It depends how strong it is, right?
Okay.
I mean, yeah, the most basic thing is just to take care of your body. And lethargy is necessarily will arise if you don't, if you eat a very heavy foods and you don't exercise, and you sleep a lot, right? So if you maintain a healthier lifestyle, it's less likely that there'll be a lot of lethargy. That's what I was saying before. I mean, it's good to learn more about it. It's not just something. There's a few tips here in the book, but about how to have a healthy lifestyle, what kind of foods to eat, and what kind of exercise to do. But then, in terms of if you're meditating, you're having lethargy, then you can try to just meditate on the faults of lethargy, thinking about this is not helpful, and then think about something positive, because it's the mind is just kind of, it's like you don't think this is so important. I'd rather just go to sleep. You think about the great benefits of meditating, and then focus on that for a time to keep the mind in the meditation. And then also sometimes they suggest visualization of light. And like if you're meditating on trying to do concentration, for example, like if you're meditating on the image of the Buddha, then the level you place that visualization depends on what you're trying to overcome. So if you have lethargy, you want the image to be higher. And if you're having lots of thoughts and excitement, then you want the image to be lower because it'll draw the mind more downward. But that's a very subtle thing. If you have very coarse lethargy, then you have to address it in a more coarse way, right? So that's as I said, lethargy is related to laxity. Like when you get to the point where you are in meditation and you're just having laxity, meaning that the object is not very clear, then it's not enough just to do exercise or to eat right, because this has more to do with the very subtle thing in the mind, that's when you apply some of the antidotes to laxity. But when it's a coarse lethargy, then you need to, it's more about lifestyle changes.
It's more preventative approaches as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yes.
Is there any specific antidote to doubt?
Yeah, so, I mean, as I said, we have to first of all identify which kind of doubt we want to use an antidote for. Some kinds of doubt are constructive. But if it's just a kind of cynicism, one thing is to gain certainty, right? Because certainty...
Sorry, a kind of what?
Cynicism. So cynicism is like, it's a subtle thing. It's an English word that doesn't actually, in Tibetan, I wouldn't think of a word that exactly correlates with it. But, so, like skepticism, you might know the term skepticism,
Yes.
is like the questioning, right? It's considered a very positive thing, especially in science. That's how science is meant to be done. Mm-hmm. That you don't just accept something because it sounds nice or because other people accept it, but because you critically analyze it. Mm-hmm. Cynicism is when you just have a kind of dismissive attitude of things. People have new ideas and you say, oh, I don't know, that's just a waste of time. It can be a subtle thing because sometimes you think you're being skeptical, whereas really it's just that you're dismissive of something that actually is a reasonable thing to think about. And that's when doubt can really be a problem. That, some people, for example, that, they might hear about Dharma practice and say, oh, there's just such a thing as enlightenment and there's the Buddha who was free of suffering. And they'll say, oh, yeah, right, I know people. That's not how people are. Well, then you close yourself off from learning something new from that. So one way might be to have an open mind, but really, ultimately doubt has to come through gaining certainty. You gain ascertainment of something, and then there's not this doubt, is it or is it not? If you're having a lot of doubt, that's why we do so much debate here. It's that you shouldn't just try to ignore it and meditate. Maybe at a certain point, yes, depends what kind of doubt it is, but at a certain point you need to address the doubt and gain a kind of more certainty in the mind. Otherwise, that's the danger, is people, they go into, I'm going to do this long retreat, and they do, we've seen this, that this is what they talk about as happening in this tradition as an obstacle, is people have this idea, I'm going to do very long retreat, but they haven't really, they might think, because they have a lot of excitement about it, that they're very strongly motivated to do it, but because they haven't really overcome all the different doubts in their own mind, after some number of months or whatever amount of time, they'll start having all kinds of doubt, and then it will be impossible to continue because they think, oh, maybe I should do this instead, maybe I should do this, maybe I'm just wasting my time, maybe meditation isn't useful, maybe I'm just being a burden on society by meditating, and I shouldn't just I should work for a living, something like that. So all those doubts come because you haven't really in your own mind ascertained with certainty that this is actually the right thing to do. It's not just a matter of convincing yourself of it. So it's not something that can be overcome very quickly, and that's why it's not so clear exactly what is positive doubt and what is negative doubt. Right? So here in this monastery, we are encouraged to voice our doubts and examine them again and again. But at the same time, there can be a kind of negative doubt when somebody, I think one sign of negative doubt is when somebody doesn't listen to others. Positive doubt should be that somebody is actually really interested in what others have to say because they want to know what's true. If somebody is just interested in their opinion and thinks everyone else is wrong, then that's a sign that their doubt is actually becoming an obstacle to enhancing their understanding. Yeah. Okay.
So study and contemplation help our antidotes to afflict doubt.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, actually, it was interesting. I thought one of the clearest statements on that was Chogyam Trungpa. We have a book here by him on Abhidharma. So he goes through the different mental factors, and he says of doubt, the doubt in the afflictions. What is it? It's a sense of not having enough confidence in oneself. So that's very different than the kind of doubt of wanting to know the truth, but it's just like a self-doubt, right? So in Zu, right, in Abhidharma by Vasubandhu Abhidharmakosha, Dromido na lamno tan lanat hetsam jinyechik, right? So he says those are the three main obstacles to entering a dharma path, to starting a spiritual path, is not wishing to go, which is talking about jikta, meaning the apprehension of a self. There's a strong sense of self, so you don't want to change. You don't really want to engage in something that's going to challenge your sense of self. That's the first one. And then lam nor means mistaking the path. So you gain this idea that doing this particular kind of practice is going to bring liberation when it's wrong, so you go in the wrong direction. And then lam na tetsom, so then having doubt about the path. So then that's the way that you just have this apprehension. You keep trying to start a spiritual practice, but you're plagued by doubts, we say in English. That's not helpful if you're just constantly thinking, oh, maybe I should be doing something else. Maybe this isn't right. You can't really stay focused on one thing. So that's, no matter what you try to do, that's going to be the same problem, that your mind keeps thinking, oh, maybe this isn't right. So then it's kind of maybe one antidote to that would be commitment, saying whether this is right or wrong, I'm going to commit to it for a period of time, so I can at least see if it's wrong. If it's really wrong, okay, I think in science that is a good approach, right? It's considered good science even if you examine something that's wrong. You have a wrong hypothesis and you try it, and you follow it to its logical conclusion, and you determine with certainty this was incorrect. Then other people won't they'll know that. So you've made a scientific discovery, even though you've proven something to be wrong. So likewise, if you don't commit to anything, then you won't really gain certainty about anything. But if you commit to it, then you can actually take the time to examine it. And so I think making some degree of committing to it for a period of time. Otherwise it's just the mind will always be going to different possibilities. Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. So sorry we went a bit later than expected, but we can do the closing prayers now.
From my two collections, vast space that I have marched from
working in effortless practice for a great length of time,
may
become the chief leading Buddha for those whose minds are blinded by ignorance. If I cannot reach this state, may I be held in a loving compassion for all the lives of Manjushri. May I find the best of complete graded paths of the teachings, and may I please all the Buddhas by my practice. Being drawn by the strong force of compassion, may I permit the transmission of the movements of all sentient beings to much of the path as I have discerned them. May I uphold the Buddha's teachings for a very long time.
With my
By
heart
going out with great compassion, whatever direction most precious teachings had not yet spread, but had spread and declined, reveal this treasure of happiness and aid. May the minds of lotuses liberation be guided boundless peace, and hence it needs matters for a long time. May this graded path to enlightenment completed to the wonders, virtuous conduct of the conquerors and their sons. May all human beings eliminate the diversity, create traditions, practice the excellent paths, never to be parted in any of their lives, the pure path praised by the Buddhas. Whenever someone makes an effort to act in accordance with the Eightfold Monastic virtuous practices, may he also be assisted by the mighty ones, and may oceans of prosperity spread everywhere.